outstanding setup. Certainly the best that I've ever come across. Yes. Clearly the Burns family had always made sure that this would be the wonderful setting to celebrate Cliff's life. As Peter, the man who knows everybody, is doing his final welcomes. How are we all going? Are we good to go? Yes? Can everyone hear me at the back? Those that are standing at the back, you all good? Fantastic. Anthony, you can get me? Okay, well, a huge welcome to everyone gathered here at Camp Manyang, and also watching via the live stream, joining us to celebrate the life of Cliff Burns. Because we're here to celebrate the life of an extraordinary man who faced huge personal challenges and obstacles growing up. But he went on to make a significant impact on literally hundreds, if not thousands of lives. So for those of you who don't know me, and most of you won't, my name is Clint Hong. I'm a celebrant. It is an honour to be here to conduct this celebration on behalf of Cliff's family. And I'm going to ask them to stand and give a wave. So can I get wife Betty to please stand and give everyone a wave? Woohoo! Yes, let's give her a big hand. And then the four fantastic children. So Peter, David, Andrew, and of course what I've been told was the favourite, Heather. Thank you all of you for allowing me to assist you today. I'll let you know that I do not take this responsibility lightly of having never met Cliff. So I'd certainly like to thank Betty, Peter, and also Heather for meeting me to share important details about Cliff's life in preparation for today. And I'm going to invite Peter and Heather up just to say a couple of words to start. If I could invite everyone who comes up to please utilise the steps. That includes you, Dylan.
Okay, thanks very much, Clint. Is that not... It's the old turn it on trick. The old turn it on trick. Thank you very much, Clint. I would just like to, on behalf of Mum and us kids, Peter, David and Andrew, and our partners, so Steve, Marie and Ray, really welcome everyone and just let you know we're so incredibly grateful that you could be here with us today celebrating Dad. We've actually got people from far and wide, so forgive me if I miss you, but Bendigo, Shepparton, Canberra, Queensland, Gippsland, all over Melbourne, the Mornington and Bellarine Peninsulas, and particularly I'd like to welcome the McDonald clan. Beautiful to see you three together. A very special mention and a welcome to Cliff's family members, our family members. They were discovered much later in Dad's life, and you'll hear more about that story later, but I would love to welcome you in particular. I've got goosebumps. Audrey Parsons, that's Dad's sister-in-law, her and Gordon's daughter Leanne, son Brett and daughter-in-law Bronwyn, and also John's daughter Meryl, and perhaps Audrey's niece Sue, who we actually went to school with each other. Over to my brother for some more. Thanks.
Thanks, H. We are so honoured to have you all here today. I'll just throw it all away. Thank you. We weren't sure and we thought about it long and hard, and this is for people to come and piece together Dad's life, say a final farewell and thank everybody. We are so delighted there's people across the ages. I'm not sure there's many here from the orphanage days. I think he outlived them all. Yeah. However, we do have people from the 50s and 60s in the YMCA? Put your hand up, please. 70s and 80s in the YMCA. 90s to today in the YMCA. Thank you, and thank you for representatives of YMCA Victoria and YMCA Australia for coming down. It means a lot. Volunteers that have been around over the last decade or two in the YMCA, hands up please. Lovely to see you as well. It's just gorgeous. And now there's a mob that Dad didn't like very much, and they were the Tally Ho Fitness Group. Guys, look at them all. Thank you so much for coming down, and Peter will speak on behalf of them a little later. Now, some people cross over. Nunawading people, Pool people. Yes, Nunawading Pool and Tally Ho, and of course Lavunday Retirement Village in East in Templestowe East. Yeah. Oh, that's you, Mum. Yeah. All right. We know there's a lot online there, and in particular, we want to say hello and. We miss you, but your hearts are here, to the wedding party for Mum and Dad, and that's Barry Young. He's mate of 71 years, and Shirley Smith, Mum's sister Shirley, who found that Dad was a great mate over the years as well. They had wonderful weekly telephone calls. So thank you all for being here, and we'll enjoy catching up over scones.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Heather. How did we all make our way to Mount Eliza today, specifically to Camp Manyang? This is a very significant place for the family. It was here that every summer the family would stay in a cottage just up the hill over the Christmas holidays, greeting a new group of families every week or so. And those were the good old days. Cliff was always working hard, the kids were always having a ball, and for Betty, she loved it because she didn't have to cook. Many, many good times. The most memorable family times were had right here, and this continued in later years with Cliff's granddaughter, Kate, and her partner, Jason, having an amazing wedding right here. So this camp was always in Cliff's life, and in his children's and in his grandchildren's lives. And so that is why today we are continuing the good times, the memorable and significant times, with this celebration in this location today. So today is about spending some time reflecting on your memories of Cliff, of the times you all shared with him to celebrate his many achievements. There is no strict order of service. This is an informal celebration. However, we are going to move through chronologically, and you are going to hear my voice quite a bit. We're going to hear about his life and times, with some anecdotes from those whose lives he impacted in a positive way. So if you want to know what to expect over the next 45 minutes or so, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll shed some happy and sad tears, and whether you called him Dad, Papa, Cliffy or Burnsy, you'll reminisce about Clifford, Alfred, George, Burns. So we're going to start with your life, because many of you will know, as a consequence of serious hearing difficulties when he was a child, which precluded him from being adopted, Cliff, despite his exceptional lip-reading skills, created some memorable and hilarious alternative words. These became known by his family as Burnsisms. And you may just hear me drop a few along the way over the next little while, along with some of his favourite sayings. So listen out for them. So, fantastic. That's the first of the Burnsisms. You're going to hear, clearly it means fantastic. Let's get started. I'll tell you a bit about Cliff's early life. So Cliff was born on the 30th of November, 1929, and he had just turned 95 when he passed away peacefully at home amongst many of his loved ones. Cliff's upbringing was marked by significant challenges, each of which he overcame and grew from. He only spent 3 weeks with his mother, Ada Mae Burns, before he was placed in the Methodist Babies Home, where he was only the second child ever admitted. In his first 14 years, Cliff spent time at the baby's home before being moved to the Cheltenham Children's Home and later to Tally-Ho Boys' Home. Now, when asked, Cliff said he never missed not having parents because he knew no other life than living in children's homes. Incredibly shy and timid, Cliff got picked on by some of the older boys at Tally-Ho. His severe hearing impairment, being totally deaf in one ear, his glasses and bad acne made him a target. And he shared a story of waking up in the middle of the sports field in his bed. He was a very heavy sleeper and he was literally picked up and moved, bed and all. He was resourceful though. He formed a clique of 5 boys to survive, and as he said, we formed our own little gang, and if you took on one, you took on 5 of us. Now, Tally-Ho was a working farm. So the boys were up early milking cows, then off to school, then back again to milk the cows in the afternoon. They spent, despite the hardships though, Cliff did say that he enjoyed his days at Tally-Ho. He spent time playing cherry bobs and eating homemade toffee on Saturday nights, although they had to buy the toffee with their tin money from the coordinator for the boys at the time, Dad Reeves. Now, life became tougher when at about 10 years old, can you believe he's been through all of this already, and we're only at 10 years old. At 10 years old, he was shipped off to a farm in East Murchison with a view to adoption. He was miserable there because he was treated like an adult farmhand. He felt like a slave, and he had to sleep out on a balcony in the freezing cold. It didn't turn out badly though, because a young volunteer from the Methodist Ladies Guild, Phil Dodman, noticed Cliff when she was visiting another child, and she started taking an interest in him. Cliff's lack of life experience was exposed as she asked him if he'd like some comics. And Cliff asked, "What are comics?" And she then offered to send them by post. And he added, "What's the post?" But after a while, she was able to have him removed from East Murchison Farm, and from then on, Auntie Phil, as she became known, visited and looked out for Cliff. The family believes that she would have adopted him were she not allowed, because she was a single woman. So at 14 years, each boy had to leave Tally-Ho Boys' Home, as they were deemed old enough to fend for themselves. And so he went to the Wesley's Lincoln House, and he worked as a houseboy, and then he got a job at G.J. Cole's in their cafeteria, responsible for the condiments. He was so good at his job that when he left, he found that it took 2 men to do the job he used to do. From there, he went on to work as a printer at CLX Decal and GW Britton and Sons. He joined the YMCA staff at 19, and this, of course, put his life on the path that he'd always deserved. But before we get to the organisation which saw Cliff progress to Physical Department Director, the chronology of Cliff's life has reached the love of his life. So let's talk about that part first. It was 1956. Does anyone remember what was happening in 1956 in Melbourne? It's the Olympics. The Olympics was on. And as best mate Barry Young shared, and hi Barry, who's watching online at the moment, Cliff and I both took out some girls from the YWCA. But it was the gorgeous girl in Bob Allen's typing pool that caught Cliff's eye. "I'm going to marry that girl," he told Barry. Now Cliff actually didn't realise how lucky he was. And when I was chatting with Betty, I hope she won't mind me sharing this, she was very popular in those days. And she had a date on almost every day each week. Sometimes 2 in one day. But one particular bloke had taken her fancy, and she saved Saturday for Cliff. So 2 years of courting later, Barry shares that the wedding day at Betty's family's home was wonderful. Barry, standing next to his best mate as best man, opposite Betty's lovely bridesmaid, her sister Shirley, who spent many an hour over the years chatting to Cliff on the phone, as they had a magnificent friendship as well. Now, the young Cliff was described at the time as looking and being resourceful like a young Maxwell Smart, and handsome and funny like Paul Hogan, with Betty being a stunning doppelganger of Elizabeth Taylor. Now, that was 67 years ago, and 4 children, 10 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren are the result. Now, many happy holidays were spent here, right here, and at Shoreham across the peninsula. And Cliff, of course, always led the activities and fun, which included not only the family, but many long-time and new friends as well. Now, Cliff would call them hangers-on, and that was his tongue-in-cheek term for new friends. So for Cliff, everyone was welcome. Venus Bay, Mount Beauty, Burleigh Heads also featured in family holidays, although probably the most memorable one was a trip to Sea Spray, when on arrival, they realised they'd forgotten to bring the pegs for the borrowed tent. So after the initial disappointment, they drove home. They erected the tent in the backyard for one of their favourite holidays outdoor ever. Now, Cliff's children have said, none of us can really put into words the bond we shared with Dad. He had no favourites, yet we each felt so important. And this goes for our partners, Marie, Ray and Steve, and all the kids and grandkids. We admired and loved him completely. Cliff was encouraging to all, and he always had advice for his loved ones. 2 of his favourite sayings were, when encouraging someone, he'd say, "You're the best." And on teaching, his view was, teaching is to jog. Don't look at where you got to go, look at where you are now. So to hear more about Cliff's impact on his family, I now invite grandchild Dylan, who's representing all of the grandkids, to come forward and share their memories of their papa.
Thanks, everybody. I got told just to do a couple of minutes of 3 or 4 minutes, but as you heard, there's quite a lot of grandkids and great-grandkids, so it might be a little bit longer. Sorry, Dad. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dylan, and I have the honour and the privilege to be able to briefly talk to you all today on behalf of Cliff's grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Papa Cliff, Cliffy, Clifford, Aloysius, Augustus, Murgatroyd, Burns, Pop. These are just a few of the names that we would call our most beloved and beautiful grandpa and great-grandpa. And really, that is what he was to all of us. A great, incredible, and unconditionally loving grandpa who we are so incredibly fortunate to have had in our lives for such a long time. These are some of the moments and memories that jumped out to us when we think of Pop. Some of the things that all of us recall, and others are little special moments and memories that were one-on-one experiences with him. Cliff's granddaughter Tony still can't believe that no matter how strong she got and how much Pop was impressed by this, he could still beat her in an arm wrestle every single time. Even when he was well past 90 and she was at the gym almost every day. In grade 2, when living in Wodonga, Tony remembers trying to walk up some incredibly steep hills. Papa's advice was to turn around and walk up the hill backwards. And it worked. Genius. Tony now lives in Queensland and can't be here today, but when she first moved to Queensland, Nana and Pop flew up to the Sunshine Coast for 2 weeks. Then, because of COVID lockdowns, they stayed for over 6 weeks. They were incredibly precious and beautiful memories for Tony, having the best time for being their full-time chauffeur, drinking countless cups of teas, and listening to Pop recount story after story, very unlike him, of his past, his friends, travels, how the world has changed, and life lessons that he could pass on. Granddaughter Stacey says, I've got so many wonderful memories of my childhood, like playing in the backyard at Blackburn, enjoying tea parties, racing around on the old wooden tricycle, celebrating Christmas, and annoying everyone by playing the old organ. One memory that really stands out is a recent one. About a year ago, Dave and I decided to drop by for a surprise visit, something we've done a bunch of times before. But wouldn't you know it, no one was home. So we strolled down to the bowls lawn because we'd heard a familiar voice and thought we'd check it out. As we got closer, Pop spotted us, and not realising it was us, said, "Oh, look, young people. Who are you looking for?" Neither of us said a word, we just moved a little closer. Just a moment later, his face lit up and he said, "These young people are here for me." He gave us a big, huge hug and then mentioned that Nana was up at the studio, but of course, he couldn't leave his bowls game. He was probably on a winning streak. Another lovely recent memory is when Pop met my baby Luca. It was such a heartwarming moment. From grandson Brad, I remember Pop teaching me to drive on my L's. He said that I was only going to have my licence for 3 months because I had a lead foot. He was pretty spot on with the timing. Always at Christmas time, watching the cricket on Boxing Day in silence. Well, we had silence. Cliffy had his headphones on. I also remember when he would say, "Don't start something I can't finish," and always saying, "Oh, here's trouble," whenever I saw him. Cliff's great-granddaughter Peyton said that my favourite memory of Pop was when he and I were sitting outside at Old Bridgewater Road during summer when I was about 7 or 8. Both of us just reading our own books. We sat in silence for a while until we had both finished our chapters, and then we just spoke about how he and Nana had met back in the day. I love this memory because at the time I didn't know it would hold such a special place in my heart, but looking back, I will cherish this forever because something so little could be so meaningful. Granddaughter Alex recalls, "There has always been a lolly jar at Nana and Pop's house. I'd always eat 2 lollies because whenever I'd only take one, he'd always quietly shake the jar with a smile until I took another one. I think that's where my love of jelly beans and mint leaves comes from, and I'm reliably told that lolly jar is here with mint leaves." Granddaughter Kate said, "My favourite thing about Pop changed as I grew up. As a kid, I loved sitting in the front seat of his Kombi while he let me change the gears as he drove. When I slept over at Blackburn, I loved watching him bring Nan a cup of tea in the morning. As a teenager, I loved to sit and listen to the stories he told about his childhood and his early career. To me, he had the most fascinating life story I could imagine. There was a time I thought I might take a year off to interview him and write a book. I'm actually pretty sure I tried to nominate him to appear on Australian Story too. As an adult, my favourite thing about Pop was the way that he was always truly present and truly joyful and grateful to spend time with his family. Pop's definition of his family wasn't exclusive. Every new partner of kids and grandkids was warmly welcomed by Pop. And of course, the ruder he was to them, the more he liked them. But he was a sharp judge of character too, and there was one questionable ex of mine that Pop didn't take a shine to. On one occasion, Pop greeted him by saying, "Hello, rough nut." And in a moment that's gone down in Cliffyism history, he followed it up by saying, "We used to have a goat called Rough Nut. We shot him." But it would be remiss of me to reflect on my favourite memories of Pop and not to mention that 8 years ago, in this very chapel here at Manyang, my husband Jason asked for Pop's permission to marry me. Of course, this was mid-wedding ceremony and in front of 90 wedding guests, so Pop stood up in the front row and proceeded to performatively negotiate a deal between our two families before finally declaring, yes, we had his blessing. In the best and most truest of ways, Pop was the very definition of a family patriarch to the Burns family. This is from grandson-in-law Jason. Being a late and willing inclusion into the family, regular jokes popped up about Cliff's approval or invitations to join the Burns clan. There is some thread of truth behind all comedy. The approval of this venerable figurehead wasn't needed to officially transition into this tight-knit extended family, but his blessing was revered. Why was this the case? Well, quite simply, Cliffy was a very astute judge of character. Playful teasing mixed with deep and engaging conversations and sprinkles of childlike humour were his chief tactics. measuring your responses, delicately testing if you are worthy of inclusion in the circle of one with honest and strong values. Gratefully, once you passed, you were in for life. From Kate and Jason's 7-year-old daughter Theo. My favourite thing to do with Papa Cliff was to eat fairy bread with him, because we both love fairy bread. The best time to eat fairy bread was with him was on his birthday, definitely. And from 4-year-old Eden, I like walking around the lake with Papa Cliff and Annabeth. From granddaughter Amy, who so rightly said it is so hard to narrow down a few memories and that it doesn't seem anywhere near enough for such a big person. But here are a lot of little memories of Pop. I used to love surprising him with butter and honey at the end of a salad roll before he had a chance to ask, even though it was never a surprise because he always did it anyway. His resounding, "Oh no," or "Betty," or "Here's trouble," whenever he saw us appear at the door to visit him, followed by the biggest hugs, if he could get to us before Nana did. When he'd catch your eye across a big family get-together and wave to you with his little finger and smile, and the way he'd always cleaned the corner of his mouth with that same little finger after a meal. More than anything, I just loved sitting beside him and holding his hand and his big, round, knobbly fingers. For me, I have been lucky, or unlucky, enough to inherit Pop's absolute love of football and Carlton. I have vivid memories of going to many, many footy games together, from being a young kid to our last game that he went to in 2023 with Pop, Dad, Heather and my partner Megan. It was such a special thing to be able to go one last game together. He always loved his sport, and whatever sport I was doing, he would be there supporting and telling stories of his endeavours in that sport. I will always remember his "Yahoo!" or "You beauty" when Carlton was in front, the way that he would always harmonise when singing the theme song, the way he'd always sing in the kitchen with Dad and tell him off for not harmonising, and the grace with which he aged. Always active, just changing those activities from running to riding to walking as he got older, but never sedentary. My dad and I were lucky enough to play a game of cricket together about 5 years ago, and Pop came to watch. But Pop, being Pop, wouldn't sit and watch. He was walking laps at the oval, and at every seat he would stop and do some tricep dips or push-ups. Hopefully these memories gave you an insight into what an amazing grandfather and great-grandfather Cliffy was to us all, and how much we love him.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Dylan, and thanks to all of the... And thanks for turning the mic off. And thanks to all of the grandkids and great-grandkids for sharing their stories. And Kate, I'm very relieved that I wasn't the celebrant on that day and having to negotiate the the deal between Jason and Cliff. All right, let's get back to Cliff's career and to the most significant part of Cliff's life, the YMCA days. So the YMCA was truly a family affair with everyone, including Betty's father, Bill, and the children, and many grandchildren were also involved. So Cliff started in 1949 working for the National YMCA at Mount Beauty. His role was to provide films, arrange intercamp competitions, and a canteen service, providing recreation to people from dozens of nationalities building the SEC hydroelectricity scheme. Tensions between the workers, though, were high, even in those early days. And Cliff showed his passion for community building as he skied and drove through heavy snow on very narrow roads to ensure that films, cigarettes and chocolates were available, because that was a great way to keep the peace. So a couple of years later, and he was now with the Melbourne City Road YMCA, Cliff moved into management, running the boys department. And it is here that he met his best mate of over 70 years, Barry Young. Now, Barry shares that Cliff was a man of many talents, including having a magnificent singing voice. So in Barry's words, it was in the Y that we enjoyed singing together. We humbly won first prize in many annual club and interstate Y competitions. However, in the Adelaide comp, the judge said one of us sang through his nose. We still won. We've always wondered who the nasally one was. There was never any admittance of such. But today, in writing, I have it from Barry, saying, well, it was me. But I can still hear Burnsy harmonising our winning tune, Jimmy Crack Corn. So during those early years of their friendship, Barry also recalls attending a famous Harlem Globetrotters match, seeing the first night cricket match against the Windies, seeing Nat King Cole live, and attending the 1959 semi-final when Barry's Hawks beat Cliff's beloved Blues. And by some miracle, they still remain best pals. So back to the boys department, and Cliff, well, he did a fabulous job, reaching record attendance. And there was a young boy named Barry Furness who was welcomed by Cliff at the time. And Barry, well, he later became the president of the Musketeers Club, and he went on to become a wonderful servant of the Y with an outstanding career of achievements. And to tell you more about that experience with Cliff, we have the self-same Barry Furness.
Good afternoon. I consider it an honour to have been asked to share with you a tiny part of my friendship with Cliff Burns. So, a little about me. When I was 10, my mother insisted that I join the YMCA in Melbourne. She took me to City Road YMCA, and it was there that I first met Cliff. He oversaw the boys department, and he enrolled me. My mum, who used to worry what was going to happen to me, Mum hovered around me, anxious to know what was going to happen to me. Cliff informed Mum in a nice way, but in the firm way that Cliff could use. He said, "You've brought him into us as a boy, and we'll send him out as a man. You go off into the city and do your shopping, and we'll take care of him." That began the greatest journey of my life and began my long friendship with Cliff. Now, interesting enough, Cliff oversaw the boys department, and at the time when an article appeared in the YMCA Manhood magazine, it stated the following: 1,200 boys attend the boys department on a Saturday morning, and there is a waiting list of 700. That article spoke volumes about Cliff and his work in that department. Cliff mentored me through those years, and when I was 17, I became a colleague of his on the YMCA staff of Melbourne. That exciting time of working together with Cliff formed the foundation of a great friendship of 71 years. He taught me good work ethics and consistency. His other qualities that stood the test of time was his humility, his integrity, his compassion, and the desire to bring the best out in all those he met and worked with. But one thing was sure, it became clear to all those that knew Cliff, Betty, his wife, was his rock, always supporting him and being involved in his many activities. He was very, very proud of his family, his grandchildren, and his support and encouragement to them was so obvious and commendable. Cliff loved both Camp Buxton and Shoreham and Camp Manyoung, and I'm so glad that we are remembering and honouring him here today. Many of us will have special memories of being on a camp with Cliff. He always made those times memorable. They were always so much fun, fellowship, and learning as he shared with us. Today, however, as we remember Cliff, we celebrate the privilege and the value of true friendship optimised in Cliff. One of the best statements, I think, to sum up Cliff's impact on the YMCA, on me personally, and this world would be, by your life, you made a difference. Thank you, Cliff.
Thanks, Barry. Wonderful words. Pretty clear that Cliff was a born leader, inspiring people to be their best. He always the best in people. But that's not to say that he was naive. If you crossed him, that was it. He gave people around him, including his children, the confidence to give things a go. He had leadership in his blood, and he passed that on to all 4 of his kids. The qualities of kindness and integrity, or vice versa, and that's another Burnsism for vice versa. But as a leader, he was also cheeky in that he got away with saying things that others wouldn't, and this often got things done. Cliff was, in his kids' words, wonderfully inappropriate. If he liked you, he would insult you. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a test on that. Who amongst you here today has been insulted by Cliff? Put your hands up. Congratulations, you were the ones that he liked best. Now, another strong quality of Cliff's was his sense of fairness and equality, or vice versa. And in the 70s, one of his greatest achievements was that he started a women's health and fitness weekend program at the Y. And that was up to 120 women enjoying yoga, calisthenics, volleyball, and best of all, a break. It was a radical move, controversial for sure. Just think of the time that was. Husbands complained. They couldn't cook, and what would the kids eat? Cliff, he was always a groundbreaker. He was fiercely loyal and supportive, and he had a huge impact on so many struggling individuals who arrived at the Y seeking support. And here is one of those individuals, Andrea Brown, to share more.
I don't like microphones, but I'll use them. Cliff Burns was an extraordinary person, but a great friend. I'm sure everyone here has a particular story about Cliff and what he did for them and how you related to them. Cliff Burns, without knowing it, gave me the strength to continue living. In 1971, on New Year's Day, I woke up knowing that I had less than a dollar. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, less than $1 to actually in my life. I had my mother to support. It was a difficult time. Come down 2 months later, Cliff Burns was looking for an instructor for his women's group. I happened to get the job. I'm not too sure it was a good thing for him or not, but it was a good thing for me. Cliff, to me, was a master at his own game. I'm sorry, I'm going off script. Always do. But I've got the cards in case I need them. And I've got there in case Peter needs to continue. But he was a person who could speak to all ages, all sexes, and he had the ability to have people included at all times. For me, sitting back and standing back and watching Cliff, it was seeing a person at his master's game. He really, really did know how to look after people. I always say that there's always something good that comes out of something bad. Bit of a Pollyanna statement, I suppose. But Cliff was that person. He gave me an opportunity. He gave me the opportunity of earning money. But more importantly, he gave me the opportunity of meeting a great person, a great family, because we can't take away Betty in regards to the terrible two. He was always there. YMCA was, and Camp Marignan had a huge part in my life. But more importantly, it was giving me the opportunity to progress. And really, that's what every young person needs, is an opportunity for someone to give them that opportunity. There's also, it's important to have that person there to give you that hand up when you needed it. Cliff was that person to me. He was so good at communicating. He always had a smile, and he had a variety of different smiles. He had one that I called the devilish smile. His face was light up, he'd have a twinkle in his eye, and I knew he was going to do something that he shouldn't be doing. I can give you one time when I didn't see the smile coming. I was actually taking a ladies' class at the swimming pool in the YMCA, had my back towards Cliff, and for some reason he decided to come up and pretend to push me in the back. Well, I reacted, and before I knew it, I did a wonderful hip throw. He landed in the pool, fully dressed in his good slacks and shirt to go off to have a meeting, because that's the reason I was employed.
Black belt judo practitioner.
Well, years ago. Basically, Cliff just looked up at me and said, "I'm in a hurry now, I have to go off to a meeting." The women in the class thought it was hilarious and improved the class enormously. You can finish the story yourself, because to this day, I don't know what Chris went to the meeting in. Did he go dripping wet into the meeting? Did he change into his running shorts? I don't know, because we never discussed it again. I wonder why. In 71, I'd mentioned to you that I woke up with very little money. The reason for it, that a family member had planned very well and executed it, a scam that we call it in these days. I actually call it theft, but it's a scam. And somehow this person managed to ensure that he took all our money, that's my mother and myself, our business, and left us with nothing. But look what happened. I progressed. And it was because of Betty and Cliff that I came across that way. Because not only did I have the opportunity of earning money, which in those days was pretty important, because on New Year's Day, 71, my work was picking potatoes in a market garden. Not very good at doing it, because I used to have an MG. Had the tractor packed with potatoes, and Andrea gets on and forgets she wasn't an MG and takes off. All the potatoes went everywhere. I also had a job pouring petrol. The younger people would not know today what pouring petrol meant, but we used to drive up to the petrol station, sit in our car, a person would come and say to us, "Would you like something?" We'd then tell them we wanted some petrol, so I was the person pouring the petrol. I also had to check under the bonnet for the oil. I had no idea where the oil was, let alone having to check for it. And then we had to put some air in the tyres. But from there, I moved on. And I moved on because I had that opportunity with Cliff and Betty. I also believe I have to, and I haven't got it on the script, but I think I need to acknowledge that the opportunities Cliff gave me were great. Even if it was just a matter of saying, "Andrea, do you think you should go and do a first aid course if you're going to be working with people?" And I don't know whether you remember it, Betty, that we spent some months and weeks going into Melbourne, going to the first aid course. And that first aid course gave me a feeling of, yes, you can study, yes, you can learn, yes, you do like biology and physiology. I particularly enjoyed coming home in the evenings and practising our bandages on Cliff. The best one was his broken jaw, because I put it on so tight he couldn't talk. It was the only time we could get some peace and quiet. But that was a fantastic understanding. And from there I went on and studied and got distant degrees so I could actually move further afield. The YMCA, he invited me to go to Camp Bunyal. First time, it's when I met Betty and the kids. A bit younger at those times, in fact, Heather, I think you probably weren't even at kindergarten. but it was a situation where I could see that people could have a family life and people could be trusted. Moving on, some years later, I actually ended up working in a camp, my own camp. And here I saw the value the camp life and outdoor education could do for young people. And hence, I've retired now. I still feel that quite strongly. People talk about Cliff's skills and what they can do and how he communicated. My attitude is you cannot train that. It was Cliff's personality that actually gave him the ability to communicate with everyone, and it's something that I will never forget. So I can go through, yeah. So that's I did.
She's going to she'll throw them in the air in a minute.
Oh no, I did that once, so now I've numbered them.
Oh.
Both front and back. Right, keep going, yeah, sorry. So basically, I would also like to go through the situation of Cliff giving me the opportunity of actually having the confidence to go on with my life. And I'd like to talk about one time that was particularly important to me. Cliff, even though I was taking the classes, he would always pop around to the classes, say hello to the women, make sure that they were feeling comfortable, and then move on. This particular day, I walked in, saw the women there, saw Cliff there, really didn't take much notice about it because it was quite normal. But all of a sudden, the women turned around and started clapping. And I sort of was a little bit taken back. And the reason for it, that Cliff had actually told them that I'd won a sporting event the weekend. But the thing that got me the most, he said to me, and I'm sorry, Andrew, but I know he called me Andy, so I'm sorry about that. He said, Andy, I am proud of you. And that was the first time I could remember someone saying that to me, and that had such a big impact upon me. At the age of 23, 24, that was enormous. Yeah, and so really, until you can't be proud of yourself until you know that someone is proud of you. So that was something that really, really made an impact upon me, and something that will always stay with me. The thing that stayed with me too was the smile on his face, and so other people would know that when Cliff was very happy, his whole face just glowed. There was this massive glow that came across his face, and I knew then that I had done all right. In summary, the first 23 years of my life was filled with traumatic events. It wasn't just having the money taken from me, and it's something I don't even think you know, Peter. For 12 to 13 years of my life, I was physically and emotionally abused. It was something that I don't think Cliff knew. But learning that there was a family out there that was happy, obviously they had their own arguments, but they were still very happy. They were there to care for people, and that's what I learnt from the situation of the opportunity. If I can just say this, and I'll read it out to you. Cliff and Betty helped me heal my past by nurturing my present. And that's what I hope that everyone else can do. If you think of Cliff and you want to give something back to the community, then maybe nurture someone in the present. I am sad that I won't be able to speak to Cliff anymore. My last time I spoke to him was on his birthday. And I have to say, kids, I didn't get much word in because he was so proud of what you guys did. I just said yes and no. And he just kept telling me about Andrew moving, his trucks and whatever, and David and Heather, everything. He was so proud of you. And that also came that he once said to me he wanted to have a family tree, and guys, you gave it to him. All right. Cliff will always be in my heart, and I'll always remember what he did to me, and I'd be remiss to say the family, I'm so pleased that you shared him with me. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. That was a stunning, seriously stunning and heartfelt story.
I'm not that old, guys. I just need assistance.
I'm going to move on to something that I know you all know that Cliff was really passionate about, and that was his absolute obsession and love for fitness and sport. So this is, his love of sport is probably best encapsulated by a story from his childhood. So at the time, a teacher took a dislike to Cliff. And in those days, when sport was everything to Cliff, the teacher challenged the entire class to learn the 8th Psalm before lunch, and he required Cliff to recite it in parrot fashion, or else there would be no sport that afternoon. So when the teacher demanded, "Stand up, Burns," he recited it word for word, and he still could do it 80 years later. Now that's motivation. Now, Cliff ran 10 kilometres a day for 60 years, and daughter Heather recalls he had this routine of ripping off half a stick of chewy on the way out and then performing his post-exercise hand weights and stretching routine on his return. And over most lunchtimes during the week, he'd run with Barry Young and others around the botanical gardens. And this was in an era when it was strange to see people running. Cliff started the Melbourne YMCA Run for Your Life program for city executives, perhaps the first to use the tan as a running circuit. And the group featured on a famous TV show of the time, This Day Tonight. And he and Barry, well, they ran several Melbourne marathons. And Betty was always there at the end with cream for their battered feet. And apparently Cliff was known as having the best legs. Very muscular calves, I'm told. So if you asked Cliff how he was, you would always say he was as fit as a Mallee bull, or never better. These are more of his favourite sayings. Now, Cliff was even responsible for initiating fitness weight training for groups of high-profile athletes, like the Olympic basketball team and the North Melbourne Football Club. And this was contrary to popular opinion at the time that weight training was bad for you because it slowed you down. So all of this obsession with fitness, of course, brings us onto the Tally Ho Fitness Group. Cliff was, of course, a life member. Now, he would leave at dawn every Saturday for a rigorous exercise workout followed by a strenuous run. And he wouldn't even have time for his Wheaties, which was a Burnsism for all breakfast cereal. And the group also ran regularly in the Dandenong Ranges, and they enjoyed a barbecue after. They also went to Wilson's prom on fitness weekends that literally sounded torturous. And now, to many of us, this extreme type of exercise would probably sound pretty silly or ridiculous. But in Cliff's word, it was saspridicious, which is his Burnsism for silly and ridiculous. So basically every Saturday would see running, exercising, sports, swimming, surfing, eating, drinking, repeat. But now more on the Tally Ho Fitness Group. I would now like to introduce Peter O'Brien, who is the president of the group.
Hello, up the back. Now, as he said, my name's Peter O'Brien. I'm the president of the Tally Ho Fitness Group, and I know that Cliff would not be happy if we didn't warm up before a session. So I'm going to get you to all stand or sit, and we'll do a few stretches. Okay, there's a couple of Burnsisms. So your right hand up, your left hand up, your right hand up, your left hand up, bending over, a little bit, bending over, a little bit. Now if you're standing, you have to do the little up and down, little squat. Hands out beside you. 3. And he'd say, you've all done very well. Okay, as President of Tally Ho, I extend to Betty, Peter and all the family our condolences and the apologies of many members who are not able to attend today but who wish to. Tally Ho for the uninitiated is a group of about 100 men passionate about men's fitness and mental health. Tally Ho dates back to 1970 and has maintained consistent membership of about 100 and is still thriving. In great part, we owe this longevity to the historical giants of our club, and Cliff Burns is one of our revered tribal elders. We owe a great debt of gratitude to Cliff, who's a life member of the group and joined in 1976. Motivational, inspirational, personable, humorous, social, energetic and enthusiastic. These and many, many more descriptors could be used for Cliff. Now, I met Cliff when I joined Tally Ho in 1989, when Cliff was then just shy of 60 and he was frighteningly fit. In 1991, he took over the training of the group full-time from Murray Whitmore, and then the fun began. Now, Cliff said last year at a gathering for Laurie Adamson that the day he took charge of Tally Ho training in 1991 was the proudest day of his life. Now, I suspect, Betty, he meant a close second to his wedding day. He had a number of punishing routines, particularly aerobic-style warm-ups. He just got the hang of one move and he was on to the next. He was spent at the end, but that was just the start of the session. Alan Purton called him the man of 1,000 exercises, and I never saw him refer to any notes. It was all in his head. Cliff drilled us in his favourite routines and encouraged us to give our best. Weights, boxing, push-ups, sit-ups, V-sits, squats, treadmills, dead ants, leg raises, burpees and other tortures, in addition to lots of running. Could have done without this wind. He had some standard drills that became ingrained. They were run-throughs, using blackboards, relays, suicide sprints, to name a few, and they're all done to music. Now, sometimes I'd be going down the street and I'd hear certain music coming out of a shop, and I'd automatically get set and start to run. You know, like Pavlov's dog, he had me trained. Now, my theory is that he had us trained in certain drills that ran themselves so that he was free to go and touch base with everyone, encourage, coerce and rubbish or admonish his favourites. I can still hear him now. Put in! Trevor, what are you doing? Can he stop talking and do something? Billy Hayes, keep up. We've finished doing that now. John Patterson, aren't you on the committee? Lance Fennell, why won't you do your push-ups? Ad infinitum. Now, Cliff talked the talk and he walked the walk. He personified physical fitness and demonstrated the people skills of a great teacher. He was interested in every person and made it a point to talk to most of us every morning. He listened well and he had a great sense of humour. He made you want to do better and helped you to push yourself. He looked out for new members to make sure they didn't overdo it in trying to keep up with him. Lionel Rex remembers when he joined, being rescued like this by Cliff, and the follow-up care that Cliff provided impresses him still. Cliff can take credit for the positive physical and mental health of hundreds of men and women through Tally Ho. For a time, he also ran an extremely popular number of women's fitness groups, one of which was out of the Nunawading pool. In latter years, Cliff's return visits to Tally Ho at Christmas time, in his Christmas hat and with his bells on, were always a delight to us, whether he was guest presenting a session or not. Sadly, he wasn't well enough to attend last Christmas and he was sadly missed. Now, Cliff was not always right, though. He said publicly for years to Peter DeLue, "You're just waiting for me to die so you can be the oldest member of Tally Ho, then you'll be happy." And Peter's with us here today, and I can say to you he's far from happy today, Cliff. You got that wrong. Cliff, many, many people are never going to forget your infectious energy and fun. We give thanks for the pleasure of having known you. Now, we do our cool-down stretching, shall we? Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. That was awesome. Now, we are a little pushed for time, but I'm going to quickly touch on Ngunnawatting Pool because Peter did as well. So, after the Melbourne YMCA closed in 1978, Cliff worked at the Ngunnawatting Pool. So, long, hot summer days were offset by great friendships and a wonderful team of people, many of whom were to go on to be influential leaders in the recreation sector. Now, I'll just read a couple of phrases from a couple of messages that came through. So Nigel Taylor used the phrase, "One of nature's gentlemen was created for this very special person." The phrase, "one of nature's gentlemen." And Ian Story said, "Cliff was a strong guiding influence, and it was a second family to me. Cliff had this innate ability to build lasting relationships, high-quality relationships, which you can see have had such an impact on many." So now I'm going to move on to something totally different. And you'll remember, potentially, earlier I referred to Cliff's long-lost family. And now it's time to share some of the miraculous details of this important part of Cliff's life. So in the early 90s, Betty started researching Cliff's biological family following major heart surgery, and they began gathering information about his birth parents, motivated by questions regarding his family medical history. And it was a slow process, as over a span of 20 years they gathered information about his mother, ultimately discovering her gentle and kind nature, and that after Cliff was born, she had married and she had 2 sons and a daughter. Now, knowing that these people would have no idea of Cliff's existence, he agonized over whether to make contact. Ultimately, Cliff decided to reach out via a letter, and a few days later he received a call from a very shocked John, who was his half-brother. Their first meeting allowed Cliff to learn about his family history and see photographs of his mother and siblings for the first time. And this reunion brought immense joy to Cliff, and he later travelled to Canberra to meet another brother, Gordon, and his wife, Audrey. And Audrey is here today. And amazingly, after all these years, that expanded his newfound family connections. Now, both John and Gordon have since passed. However, Cliff was very touched when he was recognised as one of Gordon's brothers and acknowledged by the extended family when he attended the celebration of Gordon's life last year. And he was even more emotional as he found out that Gordon's middle name was Burns. So these reunions in later life really enriched Cliff's life immensely, especially as he was so warmly embraced by the Parsons family. And at this point, I'm going to ask Brett Parsons to come up to say a couple of words. I'm pretty sure the mic's on.
You can hear me? It's lovely to celebrate a life well lived, and thank you to the Burns family for welcoming us, and that we can join you in this celebration of his life. Thank you, Betty. We've got to know Cliff and Betty a little bit. I guess you've got a little bit of an overview there. Personally, we've got to know with my mum and dad, my dad Gordon. And so Gordon's eldest brother, Cliff, he loved that term that in latter years that we did get to know them a little bit, of us calling him Uncle Cliff, because he hadn't had that before, I guess. So that was novel to him, and today we've got some of his wider family. So John's son Russell, Merrill, and Glenda are here, and my sister Leanne. And
go ahead, stand up if you're able.
Okay, Russell, just so Russell and Glenda and Merrill. Leanne and I, and we, that's who could make it today. But yeah, so I'll just give you a couple of reflections, because we have got to know these guys a little bit, and I know that my mum and dad, Gordon and Audrey, just delighted in being able to spend a little bit of time with Cliff and Betty. They've come up to Canberra, yes, and visited Dad and Mum, and we were able to meet them there and do a few things with you, get to know you a little bit. All of the things that you said about Cliff are true, to the extent that we have found him. We've loved to have, loved to have had more time, but I guess life deals you a hand, and that's it. We can't do anything about that, but we can make the most of it. And I think just in these latter years, they've really made the most of getting to know, and there's phone calls gone between them. I know that John delighted in that he passed away a number of years ago now, and but he delighted in getting to know Cliff a little bit. So thank you from us for being so welcome. I was thinking there of what I could say. I obviously didn't prepare anything and was asked to do something when we got here. But so our common connection, Ada May Burns, or Ada May Parsons as we knew her, was a lovely lady. And I don't know, I just reflect on a lot of the lovely sort of tempered way that she dealt with life. And that's my memories of my grandmother. I knew her, and a lot of that attributes I saw in Cliff when I got to know him a little bit. So certainly some things are close. I mean, John used to love running. Is that genetic? I don't know, but he loved it. Certainly, there are common threads that we can see in our lives that do bind us, and yeah, we hope to get to know you guys a little bit, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for making the trip and being here. I know that is a really, really highly appreciated by Betty and the family, for sure. Okay, we're getting towards the end now, and I'm just going to share a little bit about Cliff and Betty moving to Lavande Templestowe Retirement Village for the past 15 years. So Cliff always said moving to the village was the best decision he ever made. He quickly adapted to village life, not for 1 minute missing the continuous painting of their old wooden house in Blackburn and the gardening and all of the maintenance. To him, it was just being in Lavande Retirement Village was to him like being in the YMCA camp. No one could walk past his unit without a cheeky quip, and there was plenty of fun to be had. There was billiards and bowls and socialising, and his passion, commitment and leadership brought the community together in the village. He joined the residents committee and he quickly became the chair, and with his unique flair, he could tell someone off, he could point someone in the right direction, or he could just help them directly. He was a strong advocate for solar panel installation, for upgrades to the facilities, including the arts centre and also a small fitness gym. And Betty wanted to say that she's received such support from their friends at the village, and she wants all of you watching, especially those all watching online, to know how grateful she is. And there are many, many, many messages to share, but I've just picked a couple. So this one is from Judith O'Neill, who said, I met Cliff 6 months ago when I moved into the village and started walking Harry the Hooligan. Clearly her fur baby. We walked up the side of Cliff's unit and we developed a lovely banter of me having to pay a toll for using his route. I had to apologise so many times that I'd forgotten my gold coin, And his reply was, "That's okay, I'm keeping a tally." So if you find a piece of paper with numbers on it, it could probably relate to Harry and I. Wish that I'd got to know you better, Cliff, but our interactions will always stay with me. Rest in peace, you lovely man. And Kirsty Smith said, deepest condolences to Betty and family. Cliff was such an amazing man and friend to many at Templestowe Village. He was a beacon of light, laughter, friendship, and provided much support and hope to staff and residents. So we've now reached the end of our memorial. And Betty and the family, they invite you all to join them for Camp Manyang's world-famous scones and tea and coffee in the hall. So please just follow the crowd or the smell of the scones. I'm sure you'll get there. Please don't forget to sign the attendance book as well. And after all that's been shared here, I'm sure you'll also have the opportunity to reflect on memories of Cliff with some memorabilia and pics, I think, that are going to be shown up in the hall area. And I know that's going to prompt you to share some of your personal stories of Cliff. So a huge thank you again to all those watching online, especially to Shirley and Barry in particular, to everyone in attendance here in the flesh, Cliff's long-lost family, the Parsons contingent, and also to everyone. Betty can't express how appreciative the family are that you've joined them today. Now, when I asked Betty, Peter and Heather what achievements Cliff was most proud of, I thought they were going to say starting or giving women the opportunity to participate in programs at the YMCA, even when this was frowned upon at the time. Or maybe they would say it was his positive influence on so many. Instead, they unanimously said just one word. Cliff's greatest achievement, and the one he would say, was family. So Clifford Alfred George Burns, given up at 3 weeks old to a baby's home with a severe hearing impairment, which led him to using Burnsisms like Brunnings for Bunnings and prostrate instead of prostate cancer. A boy who wore glasses, had bad acne and was bullied in his youth, and a youth that was spent entirely across a range of orphanages. Someone who didn't know what comics were or what the Post was, and never knew what it meant to be part of a family until he met Betty and her family, who overcame massive challenges to create the closest of families with his soulmate. 4 children, 10 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, the result. And yet, despite him achieving so much, Cliff always said, "I owe everything to Betty." Family is most important. I'm so proud of the kids, the grandkids, and the great-grandkids. And in his last words with each of them, he said, "I'm so happy I had you." So I'm going to finish with some verbatim words from best mate of 7 decades, Barry Young. Cliff was a born leader. He touched so many lives, countless positively, enriching them through his tireless, inspirational efforts. He was a man of rock-solid morals and values, and one who gave of his heart, mind, and capacity in everything he did. And he had a vision of life that we can only describe as panoramic. Let's think of Cliff with smiles on our faces and hearts filled with thanks. Some men go through life, never lay a brick, and they're never seen and they're never heard. But Cliff Burns has been seen and heard, and he has made a significant contribution. So I asked the family what Cliff would say if he was here right now today. And the response was one of Cliff's favourite sayings: "This is the best day of my life." And I now invite all of those who are able to stand, and please, I'd like to have a moment's silence to honour Cliff's memory. Thank you, everyone. Finally, I request Cliff's children and a variety of hangers on, Cliff's word, not mine, to enact a long-time tradition at Camp Manyang. Come on up, the bell's about to ring. Peter, over to you.
One, two, three.
Come again!